Hey guys, and welcome to the channel History Matters and Matters of History, where I present my thoughts, opinions, muses on various topics and events. These are based on my observations of current events as well as past events, because events are matters of history, and as historical events, they do matter. So let's jump right on in it today. This is Black History Month, and I have a topic that I think bears some discussion. And so today's episode is entitled Content of Character, the Misrepresentation of a Dream. Again, February is Black History Month, and I Have a Dream is at the top of the list of speeches you will hear by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And there are those who believe that they know that speech better than most Blacks, especially when it comes to race-conscious policies. Often they will invoke the content of character line, perhaps the most famous from the speech, to argue against such policies, claiming that Dr. King advocated for a colorblind society. However, this interpretation ignores the broader context of his speech and writings, which consistently emphasize racial justice and the necessity of addressing systemic inequalities. And so that was the conversation I had recently with a gentleman who was white on a friend's timeline as he attempted to justify his opposition to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Several of us were involved in this discussion, and he was arguing that instead of Black people viewing everything through the lens of race, we should be striving for a colorblind society. And when challenged on that notion, he immediately asserted that this was precisely what Dr. King spoke about in his dream speech, invoking the content of character line. And this is where I stepped in, because what he thought he knew about that speech and Dr. King himself was not entirely accurate. When you read the work of Dr. King, there is just but one common theme: racial justice, not race neutrality, and his writings provide ample evidence of this. Let's take a look at some passages from some of his writings and speeches. Where do we go from here? 1967. Dr. King has this to say: "A society that has done something special against the Negro for hundreds of years must now do something special for him." He goes on to say in that same speech, "It is, however, important to understand that giving a man $1 only enlarges his capacity to absorb evils rather than root them out. It is not enough to say, go and be well fed. It is necessary to create opportunities for the disinherited to be well fed. We must see that the Negro community is as poor today as it was in the days of slavery. It is a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps." Letter from Birmingham Jail, 1963. Dr. King had this to say: "I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride towards freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice." And then there is I've Been to the Mountaintop, 1968. "We don't have to curse and go around acting bad with our words. We don't need any bricks and bottles. We don't need any Molotov cocktails. We just need to go around to these stores and these massive industries in our country and say, God sent us by here to say to you that you're not treating his children right. And we come by here to ask you to make the first item on your agenda fair treatment where God's children are concerned. Now, if you are not prepared to do that, we do have an agenda that we must follow. And our agenda calls for withdrawing economic support from you." These are just a few examples, but even from these four passages, it is clear that Dr. King was not advocating for race neutrality. Instead, he was asserting that race-specific policies are necessary to correct racial injustice. The first quote speaks directly to affirmative action and beyond, while I've Been to the Mountaintop promotes his race-conscious activism. He was calling for economic action by Black people, saying, in essence, we will take our dollars elsewhere if you don't respect us as Black people. That is not colorblindness. It is an acknowledgement that race is a factor in American society and will continue to be in the years to come. It is impossible to have a completely colorblind society. For example, in my line of work, pulmonary function studies have their norms based on race. If the wrong race is input into the software, the results will be skewed, making it necessary to account for race in order to obtain accurate test results. More importantly, we live in a country of many hues: blacks, whites, Asians, Hispanics, Arabs, etc., each with distinct cultures. I know that for some Arabs, I cannot walk into a patient's room if there is a woman whose face is uncovered. Black, Muslims, Asians, they each have cultural norms, and to treat them appropriately as people, I cannot be race neutral. Ignoring race erases cultural identity. Race is not only about skin tone, but also about culture, history, and traditions. To not see the red man as red is to ignore the cultural identity and experiences of Native Americans. It erases their history, and in some ways, we have already done that by relegating most of them to concentration camps we call reservations. Out of sight, out of mind, colorblindness. I Have a Dream is more than its refrain. It is a speech with dual messages for two distinct audiences. For Black people, it is a message of hope for the future. I have a dream. For whites, though, it is a warning for the present and a prophecy of what will happen if things remain the same. Too often, this warning in the speech is overlooked because it makes us uncomfortable. That portion of the speech forces America to ask, have we heeded the warning? Or have we maintained the status quo? How would Dr. King answer that question today? Given the events of the past decade and the rise of the MAGA movement, along with the rhetoric it has produced, I believe his answer would be status quo. While he would acknowledge some progress, he would likely question its degree, especially as it appears that progress has taken, or is about to take, 2 steps backwards. The dream is not about a colorblind society, but rather about acknowledging race while striving for racial harmony and justice. Rather, it is about a society where all people, regardless of skin tone, coexist in harmony. Black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will be able to join hands. Dr. King was not advocating for colorblindness. He saw race, but envisioned it not as a barrier that divides us, but as a source of unity through our diversity. History matters, matters of history. My muse for the day, and that's the way it is. Thanks for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button if you wish. We'll talk to you later.